welcome back to the meeting after the meeting. I'm your host, Eric V. And today we are joined by Dr. Basso. How are you doing today?
Good, I'm doing all right. Thank you.
Great. And where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from New Jersey, from South Jersey in Marlton, New Jersey. Close to Philly. My mom's family grew up in Camden. My dad's from Brooklyn, New York. So all my family are up there. And but now I'm in Virginia at Virginia Tech. We moved down here after my husband and I did our postdocs at NYU. So I got to spend a little bit of time in New York City, which is something that I'd always wanted to do. But now we're living the country life in Blacksburg, Virginia.
Oh, there's so many questions there that you just... Southern Jersey, you mentioned Philly, but you also mentioned New York. So what's your sport affiliation?
Oh, well, definitely Philly. Philadelphia Flyers and the Phillies and Eagles. So definitely a Philly girl all the way. Okay.
So you were pretty happy when Nick Foles took you guys to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And I grew up, I guess my dad was never really into sports. Kind of later, my parents got into football a little bit, but my grandma was always into the Phillies. So we always would go to baseball games, and fond memories of that during the summer.
And you mentioned one other thing that's an interesting, just side point. And I know we're not talking quite about recovery yet, but you mentioned that you lived in New York City and now you live in Blacksburg, which if people, aren't familiar with Blacksburg, there's a very lonely road on 81 to get to Blacksburg. So which do you prefer? Do you prefer that city life, or do you prefer kind of the country slow pace type of living?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously it was a big transition, but now I am preferring the country life. It was hard. In New York City, it's such a fun place to kind of come up in when you're a little bit young, in your 20s, kind of looking for a partner and all that good stuff. And so that was a lot of fun. But once I had my daughter Juliet in New York City, and then trying to navigate the subway with the stroller and the diaper bag and all the stuff, it was so much. So, so now this is a much simpler, easier life down here.
I can imagine. New York's fun, but living there is just, I can imagine it's a little stressful sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So before we get into the initiative of, your organization, what do you do?
So I'm a neuroscientist. I have my PhD in behavioral and neuroscience, and I study the effects of health behaviors on the brain, specifically physical activity and motivation for physical activity, how that manifests in the brain, and then subsequently how engaging in physical activity and other health behaviors impacts the brain in positive ways.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So do you look at habits a lot and the formation of habits and, the cues and the triggers and how to change the habit for not just exercise, but for anything?
Yeah, it's such a good point. And of course, in the work that I'm doing, kind of interested in healthy habits. And then when you get into substance abuse, right, you are in these patterns, you're in these negative or maladaptive health behavioral patterns, as we call them. Mm-hmm. And so the brain gets very used to and accustomed to not only the behavior of the thing, but say if you're a daily alcohol consumer, right, or other drugs, the brain gets very used to all of those additional chemical compounds that are on board, and the brain comes to need those things to feel normal. If you don't have them on board, then you're going to feel very off, very altered. So those are kind of the negative habitual patterns you can get into with substance abuse. But then subsequently, I study how engaging in healthy behaviors that like physical activity, eating well, how to decrease, and we have this thing called the traffic light eating plan. So how to increase your green foods, your healthy foods, and how to decrease your red foods, and how to do that from day to day through tracking your health behaviors, and through even we have kind of a case manager program where every week we offer a connection with an actual case manager to see how those habits are going. When did you have challenges in the past week? What are the upcoming challenges? And work through those things so that over time you can eliminate the negative habits and then replace them with positive habits. And then soon the body learns, oh yeah. And for me, every morning I'm like, oh, I'm craving my exercise. So you come to a point where you actually start to crave your healthy things, your sober life, and all the good things that you're doing for yourself. So it's really cool. And there's a whole neuroscience underlying that. But at the same time, if you have on board all the habits that you want to eliminate, like heavy drinking or heavy drug use, or just the sedentary behavior that comes a lot of time with abuse patterns, substance use patterns, all these things are very difficult to start wiggling and moving away from.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned kind of the craving for a healthy behavior. I skipped working out this morning due to waking up late, and I was craving it, but I was like, maybe. I'm like, I guess I'll just have to do it tomorrow, right? Like I did crave it, but it was a little bit too late in the day, and it would have messed up all the other, parts of my schedule. But
exactly,
what is the organization that you're going to be talking about today?
So today we're talking about the International Quit and Recovery Registry, and it's a program started by Dr. Warren Bickel at the Addiction and Recovery Research Center at Virginia Tech Carilion. And it is an initiative that started in 2011, so it's been around for quite some time. But in this past year, we've done a whole revamp kind of the program, made it a little bit more, new, fresh, exciting, and relevant to kind of what's happening today, kind of getting us on social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, and really trying to engage the community in new ways. So the Quit and Recovery Registry and quitandrecovery.org is the child coming at the door, sorry. So quitandrecovery.org is the website for the program. And what you can do, you kind of log on there, kind of tell you a lot about what this registry is all about. But we're a registry whose purpose is to kind of learn from all of those people who have been struggling with addiction and are now in recovery. So they have a lot of important information to share with us, right? Like, how is it that somebody can, one, get sober, and two, stay in recovery, right? So we have our registry, we have people in there that are in recovery 50 years, 25 years, right? We also have people who are 3 months in recovery, just a week or two in recovery, right? So it spans a whole length of time, which is so cool because then what we do is on a month-to-month basis, our members, and we call them recovery heroes, kind of take these assessments or take these surveys to get, they earn rewards through taking these surveys, and we get this really neat information about, what is it that they are doing to support the recovery and all the best things that they're doing. So from month to month, the assessments are different. We as research scientists kind of create a platform or a bunch of ideas that we then get to implement through the International Quit and Recovery Registry to find out all kinds of information about what behaviors, what mentalities, what habits are supporting success in recovery. So it's really cool. We have about, over time, we've had around 7,500 members. Of course, it's waxed and waned, and now we're trying to kind of build up again on the registry. And on an active membership, we have about 500 members a month. One of the cool things is that we offer this platform where we say get support. So it's an online platform, kind of like a Facebook type thing, but it's a platform where people can come in, say hi, how's it going, what's happening with your day to day. We kind of have inspirational quotes and things, and we as recovery leaders, there's a bunch, we call ourselves recovery leaders. There's a bunch of scientists at the Addiction Recovery Research Center who are on this platform, just kind of sharing, information about what's happening in our lab. And it's just, I've been asking, how are people doing during the COVID experience? I have some new data that I was just collecting, of course, how the COVID crisis is impacting stress, increasing anxiety, enhancing, depression, all these kind of negative mood states that then lead to, what do people want to do, right? They want to return to their substance abuse. Mm-hmm. So we're just trying to be sensitive to that and check in with people, see how they're doing. And it's nice. People share their stories, and we can kind of go back and forth that way.
And you mentioned something there kind of with COVID and how that's affecting the recovery communities at large in not just the United States, but around the world, when you have, right, lockdowns and quarantine. One of the things, and I have some time in recovery now, but when I was newer in recovery, you're mm-hmm. replacing a habit like we were talking about before. Like I used drugs. To replace that, I went to meetings. And eventually mm-hmm. I learned to crave that meeting. As mm-hmm. life changes, those cravings change. But I think about those people who are new in recovery,
right,
and they don't have a place to go. I mean, they can go online, but they don't have a physical place to go. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that part of your data? Or are you looking more at people who are in recovery? Because, for example, myself, I'm very comfortable sitting still. But I know from a lot of people I talk to on different, calls and like conference calls during the day, or different family members, they have trouble just, staying in the house. It seems like they're going out more now because they can't go out than before when they could go out. So which are you analyzing everything, or are you just looking at one aspect of how this epidemic is affecting the recovery community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so the International Quinn Recovery is an international registry. So we have people from all over the world. So each of those individuals are going to have a different, like a unique circumstance. Some of them are in traditional recovery programs, and we have been, one of our new initiatives is kind of reaching out to actual recovery ongoing recovery programs and seeing if we can connect the members with as we call it, the IQRR. Mm-hmm. But others are just doing recovery on their own, doing, their own kind of things, not joining with AA, NA, traditional programs. So it spans a whole range of people doing recovery in different ways. And with COVID-19, we do have a whole host of questions and of course the data is so new because we just started it about a month or two incorporating these questions. And so we're going to analyze these things. And some of the interesting data, of course, as we know around the world, every different location is being affected in a different way in terms of the number of viral cases, the number of deaths. So we are trying to collect data in terms of place and location and connect them with the Johns Hopkins University has a registry of all of this data, very important data about how hard that particular community has been hit. So we are going to try to connect that, because you can imagine that if you're in a community where the cases are really severe, like New York City, for example, my family were there, and then they had to go to different places. Some went to Maine, right? It's a real crisis hotspot situation. So that's mm-hmm. going to be different than, I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia, and it's not so bad. So I think the isolation component is a real killer. I mean, we know both from animal studies, from rodent studies, right, and just from human studies that isolation can cause all kinds of mental health issues. And I think that's that's one of the real problems here, is that everybody is just so isolated, socially isolated, scared to go out, and it can really impact some of those mental health components that might drive somebody to have a relapse. So it's important to connect these dots.
And you were talking about traditional forms of recovery, such as AA, NA, and because I'm on your website right now and I'm looking now. You have both, so I like that. I've worked different programs in the past, traditional and non-12 step, and I know this is a hard thing to measure. Is there I don't always believe the success rates when I see surveys about it.
Right.
But is that something you guys have looked at from the analytics to see if one method seems to work better, or is that, in your opinion or by the numbers, something that is kind of unique and based more on individuals than it is just a broad statistic?
Yeah, well, specifically with the IQRR data, we haven't looked at that, and something that we might do with that piece of information is use it as, what we call a covariate, so kind of taking that piece out of the equation. But I think to look at it explicitly would be so important. And, I know with the literature out there, and what we're finding primarily is that the success and recovery is a holistic thing. Well, I'll tell you about one of the newest studies that we do have coming out. So it's a holistic, comprehensive thing. It's not, success and recovery isn't going to be just about one thing. And one of the pieces of information that I love that I just I didn't realize before I started studying addiction recovery is that, right, it's not just substance free. It's not just abstinence. Addiction is a chronic, relapsing, or remitting disorder. And it's the thing that being in recovery, if you have a relapse, that doesn't mean you failed, right? It's this journey, it's this process. And so, it's important to look at all the things, all the aspects beyond just the substance that recovery means. And quality of life is one of the newest findings that we're showing. So, of course, when you get into that world of addiction and you're using that substance day in and day out, the world can, become kind of small. We talk about this thing called a temporal window. So individuals who are addicted have kind of these shortened temporal windows where they're very interested in things that are highly reinforcing in this very short time period. And that is their drug of use, right? So the day is spent using and then finding the substance and maybe having some withdrawal and, continuing on with that process. So because that is the primary goal, right, the primary interest there, then a lot of other things that require a longer temporal window, such as family, friends, education, jobs, all these things that require this expanded temporal window to kind of the reward comes later, right? That all gets lost. So then what happens is the quality of life of family, friends, education, all these things kind of fall to the wayside, right? And then when you come into recovery, these things don't just magically appear. They're not there anymore, right? So the way I think about recovery now is that it's really and I use this term all the time, holistic process where it's not only about, okay, let's stay abstinent. Of course, that's very important. But can I establish a friend group? Can I get back in touch with my family? What does that look like? Can I maybe pursue those educational goals that I was planning on doing? Can I get re-engaged with work? Can I start work if that wasn't something I was doing beforehand? So there's all these different aspects. Can I get physically fit? Can I eat healthy? And that's really what recovery is about. So it's, the substance piece, of course, is there, and you want to be, staying sober and all of that, but it's a lot more than just abstinence.
No, I can't agree with you more. The more that, I come from the background of a fellowship with a foundation in fellowship recovery, and as I've grown over the years, I don't claim a fellowship at the moment, but it's, these other methods and these other parts of the journey, it's less about the abstinence, right? Of I'm not doing this, so my life is better. It's more of a bottom line of my life is better because I'm not doing this and it's not the end of the world. It's not so black and white, I guess would be the best way to say it, right? Where, and I feel like we can get lost in that sometimes, like people in recovery, where it's either, we're using or we're not. And sometimes, like you're saying with the journey, I mean, that's, it's not about a destination. It's about the journey. But I'm looking kind of at your guys, I'm just kind of browsing as we're talking on the website, and, what are some of the other resources? Well, actually, no, first, this is something I've been harping on for a while. You've brought up nutrition a few times and, physical health. Is there a correlation that, like, and, with your research, and I'm not sure if you guys have done this study yet, where there is, a lot of it, and I've kind of complained about this recently to some of my co-hosts, where we don't put enough emphasis on the physical side of recovery. We're all about, spiritual, mental, emotional, but we kind of forget about our body, and we're like, oh, well, I'll just drink, 5 energy drinks and smoke 2 packs of cigarettes, but I'm not doing heroin, so I guess everything's okay. But, I push back at that because I'm like, well, I mean, you're still treating your body pretty poorly. You're just putting something new that's bad into it. It might not be as bad. That's, I guess, like debatable. But, what have you found any? Because I do know, you get endorphins and like there's serotonin. Is there any correlation that you guys have seen from kind of recovering the physical aspect of your life once you begin down a road of recovery to improve your your success rate?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yeah, it's a question that I'm really interested in too. And we're just analyzing the data. We call it our mindfulness IQRR questionnaire. So we have a lot of data looking at all the kinds of mindful practices that people are engaging in, whether it be, yoga or meditation, other mindfulness practices, going to the chiropractor. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just so true that all these physical, the more, it's just so simple. I mean, really, the better you are treating your body, both by the good things that you're putting into it, along with the physical activity and these other practices that you can engage in, from a neuroscientific perspective, what's happening, because so say after all of the substance use and abuse that went on during the period of addiction, there's a lot of brain deficits that can happen. You mentioned that, right, with serotonin, with dopamine, with norepinephrine. So a lot of the neurotransmitter systems, they're going to be very altered. All drugs of abuse hit the dopamine system. So there's going to be a lot of impairments in dopamine concentration, dopamine receptors. So that means kind of how the dopamine, the natural, the endogenous dopamine is acting in the body, right? Without the drugs on board, the body got very used to having a drug on board to increase all of the neurotransmitter levels, right? So now the brain is at a deficit for this kind of thing. So the cool thing, what I love about exercising is that it does hit on a lot of these same neurotransmitter systems that these drugs of abuse were also hitting at. So it's kind of this opposite direction of things. So I hypothesize that the more that you are engaging in these healthy behaviors, and the more you're basically creating an enhanced healing platform for your brain. So it's the same thing if you do like talk therapy, these kinds of behavioral health interventions can also help promote any kind of healing that you're trying to do naturally. So at the same time, if you're eating a lot of high-fat foods, high-processed foods, or putting those energy drinks in, a lot of people in this area will just consume a lot of Mountain Dew, a lot of sugared beverages, and our sweet tea is famous down here in the South, right? So all of that stuff is also hitting at those dopamine receptors and those dopamine concentrations, but again, in these negative ways. And so, you don't want to replace one addiction with another. You want to try to position yourself so that you're healing your body in the best way you can. But at the same time, then it's hard for somebody that's those are habits. Like, you had been smoking, you had been drinking all those sugared beverages, right? And so now you're not just going to snap your fingers and say, okay, now I'm just going to be a vegan health guru and do all my mindfulness practices. And so, I mean, that's the reality of the thing too. So you have to be sensitive with yourself. And I love the idea of a mindfulness practice, and we're doing some of this work right now. We're just starting some new studies looking at mindfulness with and without self-compassion. So kind of doing your mindfulness meditations and saying, oh, okay, I had a thought slip in, but it's okay. I'm just going to start again, and let me get back to my meditation. And it's the same thing with I've been to some Nar-Anon, Al-Anon meetings, and I hear a lot of people talk about negative self-talk, and that's one of the things too. We have a resource on our website about positive self-talk, and it's huge because if you kind of monitor your thoughts, I mean, you could even keep a journal. This might be a nice thing, like monitor those self-thoughts for a week, see what they are, and really try to change them. And when you have negative self-talk, you need to replace it, right, with this positive self-talk. So Dr. Bob Reese, another research scientist who's part of the International Quitting Recovery Registry, I think under our section on lecture series, we do have a lecture on self-talk, and it talks about this. So, you can really be really, abusive to yourself. Mm-hmm. And we got to get rid of all that, right? So that's part of mindful living too, is just kind of caring for yourself. And it's not, I always like to say this, like, self-care is not selfish, right? It's that's part of the healing process. And it might mean, not being able to reach out to family and friends and get all your social networks connected. It just might mean journaling and making sure that you're being kind to yourself through your daily thoughts. That's part of the healing process. So there's all little kinds of things that they kind of seem insignificant, but it's so ingrained. Those are the habits. Those are like the habitual thought patterns. And they actually manifest in the brain, right, as like particular rhythmic brain activity. So it's a whole, right, to get those thought patterns changed, you're actually going to see changes in brain activity. They're nestled in there, those rhythmic activities, how the neurons are kind of talking and communicating with one another. So there really needs to be quite vigorous changes, intense changes that need to be made. And so, there's a whole host of ways to do that, I think. But positive self-talk is a good one.
Well, and you mentioned mindfulness, and I feel like a lot of people get confused about what mindfulness is. So, I mean, what are some examples of mindfulness that you guys have on your website?
Yeah, well, we were just talking about one. So the positive self-talk. There's another one on he calls it visualization and fuelization, kind of, again, a meditation on focusing on positive emotions. And, we don't have any, although it might be useful, because I did recently create and we are in the process of creating a mindfulness meditation program, but just some relaxation techniques. And again, we don't have them hosted on the website, but, meditation or relaxation kind of apps I always recommend, simple breathing techniques. I mean, as we're talking about, I'm like, oh, this is a good idea actually maybe to have, because we are doing some of this stuff in the lab. One of the things that we use in the lab, kind of another mindfulness technique, is called episodic future thinking. And it's an interesting technique where, and as I said, because the temporal window, and I had mentioned that before, it becomes quite short, where the length becomes decreased in people who are addicted and who spend their time in that short temporal window. So the idea is that by using episodic future thinking, and what this is, in the interventions that we have, this is how we do it. And this has been a successful program for us in people who are addicted. So we have them generate a whole variety of descriptive, what we call cues, from 3 months out to 25 years. So, for example, a cue for myself would be like, in 3 months, I am going to be at the beach at Assateague Island with my family camping, and I see the beautiful horses all around us. So you generate these cues from 3 months out to 25 years, as I said, and then you think about them. We provide them to you on the phone. And so the idea is that, well, 3 times a day, our participants get these cues. And so you kind of sit quietly with this beautiful, positive thought about your future, and then go about your day. So in our obesity studies, that's like we give the cues before breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then they can go ahead and make the choice to, what foods to consume. And this kind of intervention actually enhances all kinds of health behaviors. It helps to enhance healthy eating in weight loss programs, and it helps to make better choices with decreasing alcohol consumption and things like that. So, there's it's not, I think the term mindfulness is a broad terminology for kind of really deep, thoughtful thinking about the health behavior choices and other choices just in your life. And so the whole thing comes down to really decision making, right? And like every day, I don't know the number, but it's some astronomical number, like how many decisions one person has to make in a day, And so if they can be more balanced to what we call like the executive system decision making, and kind of prefrontal, frontal lobe systems that are more geared and focused towards future planning, decision making, attention, these kind of things, then you're going to be better off, in the long run with healthier behaviors, rather than making choices based on the impulsive system, which is like the I want it now, I'm having a craving, I'm going to go and use, or I'm going to go and eat that piece of chocolate cake, or whatever, right, your addiction might be. So we think about it in terms of what we call as competing neurobehavioral decision system theory, a lot of words there, but that all of our decisions are kind of toggled between these two basic brain regions or brain pathways. And so we can use all these mindfulness techniques to help shift the balance from impulsive to executive, and then that helps to make better long-term decisions.
Cool. And so one other thing I was curious about is, we were kind of talking about that black and white thinking of before, where it's, abstinence based kind of versus like the bottom line thinking. And something we've been talking about a little bit, at least, with different guests, and been looking into with, podcast recovery, is a lot around harm reduction. And, what is there any research that you guys have so far on, harm reduction and, MAT, and like, what is the difference? Like, what is the opinion of someone like yourself, where you have a more scientific background of this, and not a direct, someone who is kind of, in recovery from addiction, but, where you're looking at harm reduction, you're looking at bottom lines, you're looking at medically assisted treatment. What is there any scientific, data to back up those forms of recovery?
Yeah, so I know it's kind of this new line of research, and I always, Dr. Warren Bickel, he has research kind of in this realm on almost everything. So I was kind of looking up as we were talking, Dr. Bickel and harm reduction, and it's kind of a new field for us. We don't, I don't think our lab specifically has done anything with harm reduction. Mm-hmm. However, it's and that could be wrong because Dr. Bickel has a whole line of research dating back many years. But in terms of harm reduction, I think it's just another place, another thing to have available for people who are using drugs, and especially with the opiate crisis. This thing came on board with a lot of these doctors in the community overprescribing, and we need to have things in place that we're in this system where a lot of the governmental policies, right? Things have caused problems, right? So I think it's fair, it's good to have this kind of thing, and that it's a step in the right direction. Certainly, I think thinking about it, drug use on a communal level, and yeah, I'm not too keen on the particular research about whether having harm reduction programs helps to decrease addiction, but I think it's certainly a compassionate way to think about drug use and abuse. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so on the website specifically, we don't have anything on that. But if it is a topic of conversation and a topic of interest that's been coming up, then it strikes me that maybe we should have some kind of information about that.
Yeah, it's I don't want to speak for everyone, right? But in my experience, I've been on medically assisted treatment in the past, and I've talked to a lot of people who have that kind of bottom line, and I've talked to people who do harm reduction, and from what I understand and from what I see, recovery isn't a one size fits all approach, and we can't kind of put everyone into the same box because we're not all the same. We all come from different places with different socioeconomic backgrounds and different upbringings, whether that's, some people were brought up with a religious background and are more accepting of a fellowship style of recovery, while others aren't. And to throw everyone into the same boat and not look at people as individuals, I think that kind of, I don't know, sometimes it can be upsetting to see people turn others away because of, they're just trying to get better one day at a time, and that one day at a time isn't the same as someone else's. So no, that's good that you guys are, going to look into that. And I guess we're kind of coming to the end here. I mean, is there anything else that you can, that you would like to talk about?
Well, I mean, just wanted to primarily get the word out about the International Quit and Recovery Registry. So again, our website is quitandrecovery.org. We would love for those, in the recovery community to check out our website, join. Of course, it's a free resource. And so again, the idea is that you can take assessments, which come in monthly. We have the initial assessment. So when you're starting the process of becoming a recovery hero, you take an initial assessment where we kind of get all that good information about you, your background, just a little history of this and that. And then every month, so this opens up a whole access to all of these tasks, all of these assessments that you can take, and you every month can earn rewards. So you get points for each of these, like 500 points or so for each of these assessments that you can then later redeem for money. And then on top of that, we love for you to get involved in our online recovery community, where there's about 500 or so members who are interacting on a daily, weekly basis. And we as the recovery leaders are always interested in kind of talking to you, talking about your story, and all of that. So we welcome you to join us and share your stories and just get involved. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Julia, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on our show and promote the IQRR. And anyone out there, please check out the website. Again, that is quitandrecovery.org. And you guys can also, check out any of our social media, our websites, and, anything else of ours at Podcast Recovery. And if you need to find more information about IQRR, you can reach out to us or you can reach out on their website. But most importantly, everyone out there, stay safe and stay clean.